Well, good morning. Welcome to Debbie's Back Porch. So glad to have you. Today we're going to have a treat. I made jelly donuts. And believe it or not, 20 donuts only call for 2 teaspoonsful of sugar. If you use sugar-free jelly, which I did, so this is a low sugar treat. Here are the ingredients. You can pause and write them down. And hey, if you like our videos, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. And click the little bell icon and you'll get a notice when I post new videos a couple times a week. Now let's get cooking. Let's start with the batter. This is 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 cup of warm to the touch milk, 1 egg. I have here a ½ cup of whey from my yogurt making. If you don't have whey, just use another ½ cup of milk. This is 2 teaspoons of yeast, 2 teaspoons of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt. I might not have done that in the right order. And I have 3 tablespoons of butter melting right now. I'm not going to bother with the electric mixer. I'm just going to make this by hand. That's the 1 cup of milk. And I'm going to proof my yeast. Even though I'm using instant yeast and I don't have to, you might have all-purpose. That's my yeast and my sugar. And that sugar's a little dark because it's pure cane coarse sugar. You can use any sugar you want to. The truth is you could use Splenda or leave it out altogether. You don't have to have sugar for proofing your yeast, but it makes it a little quicker. So I'm going to let this sit for about 20 minutes, or more like 10 minutes. 20, you don't need 20. And you've got all that nice foam on there because your yeast bloomed. Now we're just going to start adding our ingredients. So I'll start with my egg. Let me beat it up a little bit. And I'll mix that in. And then I'll add the whey. And let me tell you a little bit about the whey. I made yogurt this week, and this is the whey that's left over, that's separated out of the yogurt. And there are a lot of things you can do with it. This is the whey. But you can replace part or all of the liquid in any bread recipe. There's my salt. And it just adds a little protein, a little bounce. And if you're using a recipe that's mostly water, that you use with water, it's going to make it a little bit creamier, make your bread a little creamier, and give it a little sourdough taste. So I'm going to add in now about half of this flour. And I've made a sort of a sponge here. And with a sponge, you don't usually go ahead and add the egg and the salt and all that. It's a pre-ferment. Means I mix part of my flour in, about half, with other ingredients, the yeast and the sugar if you're using it, and the liquid. And you just let it sit and pre-ferment for a little bit until it starts to bubble, usually about an hour. I'm going to cover this. I'll be back in an hour. And you can see the little bubbles in there. And I'll just finish mixing it now. And you don't really have to do a pre-ferment. See the bubbles? And oh, the smell. It's so yeasty and almost sour smelling from the pre-ferment and the whey. See that texture we've got there? So I'm going to add the flour and the melted butter. And when it starts getting really thick, I'm going to get my scraper to mix it in better. Now I've made this dough almost like this for you before in the pierogi video. This is going to be a very loose, very liquidy sort of batter dough, and then we'll finish stiffening it up as we need it. So I'm going to add the rest of this flour just up until the point that it becomes hard to mix. And that's usually about 3 cups. And the other cup we will knead in during our kneading period, and we'll knead it by hand. That's one reason I didn't bother with getting out the electric mixer, because you have to do that kneading by hand anyway. And that's because this will be a dough that's very loose, and you want to feel it as you go. So I'm going to turn this out now. And I have lots of flour on my board, and I'll sprinkle flour on top of it too. And we're going to work that last cup or so of flour into this very shaggy dough by hand. It's not hard. It takes about 5 minutes, and it really gives a good results. We're going to have a really light and airy batter to make our jelly donuts. So let me get some flour on this and clean off my scraper. And then you'll just work it. I'm going to use the bench scraper for a while because it's real sticky right now. And I'll just turn it over and fold it and put more flour on it. And I'm going to do that until I can handle the dough without it sticking to my hands. And when I get it to that point, I may have used the whole 4 cups. Might be a little less, and I've actually never had to add more. It just comes together really well doing it here with this scraper. You can see it's already starting to firm up a little bit. So I'm going to try to do this with my hands now. And you just turn it and turn it, working the flour in, and when you get it so that you can handle it, just start kneading. At that point, you want to go about 4 minutes of pretty vigorous kneading. And this is the way I knead bread. Just beat it up, fold it and stretch it, and then beat it some more against the counter. And I get a really good texture doing it that way. Just keep plenty of flour on your board. Fold it and fold it. Stretch it and stretch it. And then just beat it and beat it. Or you can knead it by the traditional method with the heel of your hand, if that's what works for you. But if you have arthritis, this is less painful and a lot more fun. So when I've worked this dough for about 4 minutes, I'll come back. So here is my proofing bowl. I'm going to put a little oil in the bottom. And if you can see, I've worked this now for between 4 and 5 minutes. And I'm going to form it into a ball. Make sure it's pinched together at the bottom. And then I'm going to put it in this proofing bowl. Flip it over, get oil on both sides. And then I'll oil the top of the bowl. This really does rise up pretty well, by the way. Seems like adding the whey made it rise more and more quickly. I'm going to just set this aside for about 40 minutes to an hour. I'm not going to put it in a particularly warm space. I'll let it rise till it's double in size, and if that takes 2 hours, that's fine too. My kitchen's about 70, except in the summer when it's about 90 no matter what I do. So I've got a little flour on my board, and between workings of your dough, always brush your board off so you don't get little bits of dried dough that get on there. I don't always scrub it off, but I always brush it off. So here we go, and I'm just going to punch this down a little bit, let some of the air out, deflate it. And here you go with this very loose, what I call bubblegum dough, because it's the texture, the consistency of bubblegum, and so easy to work. It's just a joy to work with this kind of dough. And I'm just pressing it out. I'm going to sort of form it into a sort of a square, an eyeball half of it. And I'm only going to make half the donuts tonight. It'll be about 10. And the other I'm going to put in the refrigerator for tomorrow. And they'll keep just fine in the refrigerator overnight. They might rise a little, but you can punch them back down. Or you can put them in the freezer and make them next week. So now we're going to make the individual donuts. And you can do this many ways. I'm going to roll it out and cut it with a cookie cutter. You can just pinch off about 10 similar sized pieces. I'm using the rolling pin. It's just a little bit easier. And a 3-inch cookie cutter is going to give me about 10. And as I say, this recipe yields 20. I'm only going to make 10 tonight. And you want to roll it out 1/4 to 1/8 inch. We'll roll them again after we cut them, just to flatten them out. And this is one of those recipes. It's not like puff pastry or something. You cut out what this batch will give you, and then fold it up and make it into a ball and roll it out again and make some more. And this is about right. See, this is really easy to handle. It's not going to tear on you. And I'll give it just a little bit more, and then I'll start cutting. Now, you don't have to use a 3-inch. You can make them bigger or smaller. I'm going to fry these. You could also bake them. And if you're baking them, you might make them just a little bit bigger if you want to. If you bake them, you want to put them in a preheated 360-degree oven for about 30 to 35 minutes until they're nice and brown. Now I'm going to fold this up and cut 3 more out, and that'll give us our 10. Probably could have gotten 11, but 10 will be fine. If I have a little bit of dough left over, I will put it in the bowl with the other half, and then I'll just have an extra one next time. So there we go. We've got them cut out. And then we'll get ready to stuff them with our jelly. I'm just going to roll them out a little more. I want to get them pretty thin. And give myself plenty of room to roll the jelly. And you know, if you don't make a perfect circle out of this, it's okay, because we're going to crimp it all together. Now I have here 3 different kinds actually of sugar-free jelly, just preserves. I'm going to start with apricot. And you know, if sugar's not an issue for you, just use regular preserves. And then I'm going to go around the outside with a little water so they'll stick together. And you can put a good bit of jelly in there, a good bit of preserves, because this is very stretchy dough. But that's a good amount. I think that's a 1-ounce scoop. I'm not sure, but just eyeball it, whatever looks right to you. And then I'm going to fold them up and press the dampened dough together and pinch it really well. Now, a word of caution. If it comes out while it's frying, you're going to have a big old mess. And I say that from experience. If you're baking, it doesn't matter so much. You just get a little mess. But you really want to make sure that you press this, and if anything doesn't stick, dampen it. If any little parts of the donut don't stick together, dampen them. And just make sure they're stuck together really well. And roll them on the floured board a little bit to sort of make the dough come together really tightly. And it looks small, but you know it's going to really swell up. So you roll it around a little bit to build that surface tension. And then I'm just going to put these on a parchment lined plate to hold until I get ready to fry them. I'll do just one more. I think I may put red raspberries in this one, because that's what my little great-grand likes, is raspberry and strawberry. So just roll it out fairly thin. Very flexible dough you have here. It's not at all like pie crust. You don't have to worry a bit about it tearing or breaking. And you know, I do think, just for the record, if you have whey, you want to try it, because it makes this dough, well, I don't want to say more elastic. It's a really elastic dough. It's kind of firmer. Adding that little bit of extra protein, I think, makes it firmer. So this is the red raspberry. This one will be Athena's. She loves it. I also have blackberry. So I'm just going to make a variety. If you've never tried the all fruit that you can buy at the store, Or if you make your own, if you want to make sugar-free jelly, use Pomona pectin, by the way. It's just, you'll thank me. It's wonderful. So, pinch it together. Really well. Just like that. More water if you need it. Then roll it in a little flour. I'm going to do all of these, and then I'm going to meet you at the stove. Now, if you have a deep fryer, you can use a deep fryer. I don't have a deep fryer. I have a favorite Piqua cast iron skillet that has high sides. And I'm going to just put a couple of pieces in here to gauge my temperature. You do not want this to be as high as if you were frying. You want it to be at about 320 degrees. You want these to brown kind of slowly. So you check them with a piece of dough. And if your dough pops up in 2 or 3 seconds and doesn't turn brown right away, you've got enough temperature. It won't be soggy. You can see that they're bubbling. And to drop them in without splashing, just oil your spatula or whatever you're using. Lay the donut on the oiled spatula and slide it right off. There you go. Now we're going to watch these, and it'll probably cook about 2 minutes on the first side. And you'll see the brown start to sort of creep up around the edges. You might touch them once to move them, to make sure they're not stuck. Just to move them around. See, we're getting a little brown. And to turn these, so you don't splash yourself, I always use 2 utensils. One to slide under and flip, and one to hold it and keep it from splashing. So I'm going to let these finish on this side, and then I'm going to plate one up and show you what I got. Okay, so if you wait about an hour, the jelly will solidify, and you can just pick them up and eat them. I'm not going to do that. The jelly's still liquid in there, but I want to eat one while it's warm. And I've made a little whipped cream, and I'm sprinkling, oh yes, I know, the dreaded Splenda. You can sprinkle confectioner's sugar. And I've made a little whipped cream off here to the side. It's also made without sugar. You can do all that. And I'm going to cut into this. It's so yummy. And yes, I do limit my sugar, and a treat like this is just very rare for me. But look at that. Now, as I say, if you wait an hour, they're cooled off enough that that jelly solidifies. But I really like them like this. The jelly's warm, and the whipped cream is cold, and it's just such a treat. I gave one to Athena just like this, and she said it was super duper good. And it really is super duper good. I hope you try this. This is a good thing if you're cutting down on your sugar and just have to have a treat. I hope you like it, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.